This is Irvine Welsh, and you're watching London Real.
London Real, one of the coolest up-and-coming podcasts.
I am here outside historic St. Leonard's Church, and if you've tuned into the podcast before, you'll know this building as one of the places they took the body of one of the homegirls that Jack the Ripper sliced up. I think it was victim number 5, and they brought her carcass here. And if you ever want to see a picture of what he did, it was pretty damn gruesome. So props to my man Jack. They never caught him. It's quite a good story if you ever want to look it up. This week on the show, we have another Brit, and his name is Irvine Welsh. And if you don't know who Irvine is, I don't know where you've been for the last 20 years. Irvine is most famously known for his book Trainspotting that he wrote in phonetic Scottish. If you ever try reading it and you're not from Scotland, it can be quite a task. And but where you really probably heard of Trainspotting was Danny Boyle's movie that he made in 1996. And I remember watching it, and I talk about this in the show, and it blew me away, from the music to the angst, the youth angst. And I remember me and my friends, we would say to each other, "I chose not to choose life," because that's one of the lines in the movie, even though my accent's horrible. So I chose not to choose life. So anyways, it was such a powerful film for me, and it was just a blessing to have Irvine in studio. He was so candid. I was just so worried he was going to be like, "Oh, no one's asked me that question about Trainspotting," because you know he's been asked the same questions thousands of times. But he was so gracious and so kind with his time. I had James the Colossus Thompson in there as my co-pilot. I like having James around. He is a writer as well, and he jibes well with certain guests, and they're kind of buddies as well. I think they've been trading Twitters and stuff like that. So it's a fantastic episode. He also talks about his new movie called Filth, which is starring James McAvoy, another amazing talent. I love watching James and everything he does. And he's just got it going on. Talked about his writing style. He actually creates playlists on iTunes for the characters in his books. So get your head around that. So he's a true pro and quite an international guy right now. Lives in the States. So that's Irvine. I know you're going to love this show. I'm putting out teaser clips, and I find myself watching the entire show all over again, even though I was there. So there you go. As you probably know, if you've been following this show, I am officially bulletproofed. Yes, that's why my skin is glowing and I'm looking ripped and jacked. It's because every morning I take my mycotoxin-free bulletproof coffee and mix it up with MCT oil and grass-fed butter. Why do you ask? Well, it does a lot of things. It replaces my meal for the morning, and it gets my brain all the right nutrients they need. Those oils, that fat, and then I don't eat until 1 or 2 o'clock. So it's not really just coffee. It's turning into a lifestyle. And then I get my brain down into London Real business, and I'm just flying. My first 2, 3, 4 hours of the day are my most productive, I would say. So if you want to find out more about Bulletproof Coffee or the Bulletproof Executive, Dave Asprey, he's got over 250,000 words online. It's all free at bulletproofexec.com. You can buy his coffee there as well. I highly recommend looking into this. This is going mainstream now, and people are, really intelligent people are drinking his coffee. And a lot of guys in the podcast sphere are really becoming believers of Dave. And so, I'm not stopping anytime soon. Can't stop, won't stop, Bulletproof Coffee. So thanks to Dave for the sponsor. It is the official drink of London Real, Bulletproof Coffee. If you are in the UK or Europe and want to get some Bulletproof, easy. The guys at Xbrain will hook you up. No customs, no currency issues, no drama. If you are in the EU, go to xbrain.co.uk and you can get the new MCT oil, you can get the Bulletproof Coffee, you can get all of Onnit's products as well, all the different supplements. I am a big fan, and I've just used the Shroom Tech Sport. I just had a killer kettlebell session that would have made men half my age cry. And I powered through with Shroom Tech Sport. So check that out. They also got Alpha Brain as well. And also Hemforce Protein. I've been adding that into my Bulletproof in the morning just to get a little more protein into my diet. So you can get all of that at Xbrain. Love those guys, and want to thank them for sponsoring the show. And finally, as you guys know, My grandpa told me, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And when you're online, that first impression is your website. And we've all seen some nasty websites. Oh geez, the very first London Real site was shocking. But now there's no excuse. I used to pay this web designer like chunks of money, and every time he wanted something fixed, it was like another 50, 100 pounds, and I was like, what? Come on, homeboy. Well, there's no need for that. Now we have Squarespace, and if you go to squarespace.com or click on the link here below, you'll go and you'll see how you can design your own website and have it up and running fast. They'll even do your commerce for you. They will sort your URL out. They've got 24/7 customer support on the phone, on the email. They got drag and drop functionality. I mean, it's pretty sick. And I don't know anyone out there who's creating a website right now who's not using them. So that just shows you how much they're on the ball, and they're sponsoring our show. So they help pay the rent, and I appreciate. It's quite a sign that they believe in us when they're doing that. So I really appreciate them, and I believe in the product. So go to squarespace.com. If you do want to get 10% off, it's up to you. Then use the code London6 or not, whatever, man. You can go in, get a free trial, start setting up your site right away. We are in the process of transferring LondonReal.tv entirely over to Squarespace, and it's looking dope already. We got some developers who are working on it, and it's going to look sweet. So there you go. That's it for the business. As you know, if you want to get involved in this show, just email me at info@londonreal.tv. I'd love for you guys to help. We got a crazy intern base all over the world that help promote all the shows and do all sorts of stuff in the background. On Twitter, you know what we're at, London Real TV. If you're listening to this, please subscribe on iTunes. Come check us out at YouTube channel London Real TV. We got something really interesting cooking up with my man Colin Pyle, which was the guy who drove his motorcycle across China and got a Guinness Book of World Records for it. Him and myself and Bryce Keane, who's one of the three beards who runs the Silicon Drinkabout in London, which is this crazy phenomenon I've been to once and I'm going tonight. The three of us are creating Silicon Reel. Yes, baby, you heard it here first. Silicon Reel is going to be 30 minutes, and you are going to get to know somebody in this startup community, probably tech startup. It could be a venture capitalist. It could be a guy that's pitching an idea. It could be a seasoned professional. Who knows, man? It could be somebody involved in the government. But it's all people to deal with the tech startup scene, and I just feel like we need to do this, man. There's so much going on. It's so exciting. It's so much fun to go to these drinkabouts, man. It's like there's real energy and passion when people are doing these things. So that's coming down the pipe. I don't know when I'm going to have time to do it, but fuck it. We're going to do it. So there you go. In the meantime, we've got Immortal Tech coming up. We got Bryce Keane from the Silicon Roundabout coming up. I just heard we got Rosie Sexton, first British female fighter in the UFC. She's coming down. Rosie represented hardcore at UFC 161, man. She's tough as nails, tough as nails. So excited for that. And like I said, Dan Hardy sometime in August. So peace to all of you. Thank you so much for letting me get to do this cool job. It's a lot of fun sometimes. And now I give you author Irvine Welsh and James the Colossus Thompson.
Cool.
Indeed.
Here we go.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My co-host today is James the Colossus Thompson, who is a heavyweight mixed martial arts fighter who will beat your ass if he gets angry. James has been part of the Cage Rage organization, the Elite Extreme Combat, and of course, the Pride Fighting Championship in Japan.
All true. All true, Brian. All true. You tell no lies.
You have your own blog, which is Colossal Concerns, your own YouTube channel called Colossal Collective. He's got a great video on internet trolls on his YouTube channel. He's hugging the internet troll at one point.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, you have to see it. It's good.
God.
I really like that. So thank you so much for being here, James. As you can tell, Irving, I literally bring in the big guns when we have important guests. So that's why he's here.
Fabulous.
And our guest today is Mr. Irvine Welsh, who is a Scottish novelist, a playwright, and a director. You might have heard of this tiny book he wrote maybe 20 years ago now called Trainspotting, which was made into a movie directed by Danny Boyle. And recently you've published Skagboys, which I believe is a prequel to that story. I'm really looking forward to reading that book. Welcome to London.
Thank you. Back to my old stomping ground again.
Yeah.
I've been here for years and years, and I miss it. You know, I mean, I've lived in Chicago now for 3 years, and I've lived in Dublin for 6 years before that. So it's practically a decade out of here, you know, and I like coming back. Like.
Yeah, I was thinking when you arrived from the States, I mean, and I got a bunch of questions for you, but what is your relationship with London? Because you probably have so many memories, you know, the punk years, and you were down here. Were you doing real estate development in London? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I came down here, I left, I basically came down here when I left my mum's place when I was 17. It was the first time. I stayed down for 2 years, and basically just couch surfed and kind of fannied about for a couple of years and had a really good time.
That's like 70s, 75, 76, something like that?
Yeah, maybe a wee bit later, 77, 78.
Okay.
Then I came back down, I was back up for a year and then back down again, and it's just been like a yo-yo, you know, back up between London and Edinburgh. I think that I probably might have spent more time on that bus between the two. You know, spent in either London or Edinburgh. I probably spent more time in like Grantham or Middlesbrough or something like that. Like, you know?
And why back and forth? I mean, was it just like too much big city life? I need to get back to my roots?
I don't know. What I think it is like, and it's probably the reason why I've moved around for so much, that never stay around in one place enough to piss everybody off. Like, you know, 'cause they're actually happy when you come back.
Yeah.
You know, you make that, you're away and you think, you go back and everybody's going, oh, how are you doing? Good to see you. Long time no see. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, you see them beginning to change and go, oh, fucking get rid of him, like, you know. So it was always kind of doing these kind of short bursts in one place and then back up to the other. And I kind of thought that would be the pattern of my life. And then I decided I moved to Amsterdam for a couple of years, which was kind of fun as well. And then over to the States to San Francisco. And then back to London again, basically, back to Scotland again, and then over to Chicago, and then back to London again, and then and then Dublin for 6 years.
6 years, wow.
Which is the longest I've kind of spent in one place.
Any
since
reason
I left.
for Dublin?
I don't know. I got to that point like. My wife was, she was working over there at UCD and she was going to be there for 3 years. And I got to that point where I thought I wanted to stay in one place, you know, I didn't want to move again. And she wanted to go back to Chicago, that's her hometown.
Okay.
So I thought, well, give it another shot out there.
And you've been there now for many years?
I've been there for 3 years, like, yeah.
3 years with the Yanks. All right, I want to talk about the Yanks more later. But I want to just address the thing that I know everyone wants me to ask you. And you know, I prepare for people by getting a bunch of facts about them, and I know a bunch of facts about you. And then I woke up this morning and I was just like, you know what? I felt a certain way when I saw the movie Trainspotting, and I remember it so vividly. And I think I was in Chicago at the time, and I'm just this American kid watching these guys and girls from Leith, which I didn't know where that was, you know, someplace outside of Edinburgh, and it just resonated with me so much, and obviously the rest of the world. And I remember somebody saying something about the movie, oh yeah, that's a movie about heroin, and I was like, no, It's not a movie about heroin, it's about these young people growing up and struggling with their life, and that's my opinion. And I was just wondering if you could say why the book and the movie, why did it resonate so much with the world?
I think it's really to do with the characters. I mean, because everywhere I used to go touring the book, you know, if I went to Moscow or to Cape Town, you know, wherever it was, people would say to me, you know, oh, we've got a sick boy, we've got a Begbie, we've got a Spud, you know, everybody just knows these guys because they are kind of archetypes in a way, you know, you've got the kind of, you've got the nutter, you've got the fanny merchant, you've got the kind of the lovable loser, and you've got the kind of cynical, kind of intellectual, and everybody's got one of them in their kind of group, and they're a bunch of young guys going out sort of on the town.
Everyone can relate to them kind of characters. That's what I was wondering myself. Did you have a group of people, or are your characters a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and a kind of hybrid? Yeah,
I mean, it's weird when you think, in terms of where they actually come from when you start to write them. It's a really strange place. I've not to my own satisfaction, I've not really been able to put my finger on exactly what it is.
Right.
Because a lot of mates back home, they'll say like, oh, I know who Sick Boy is, I know who this guy is, I know, and it's like, and most of the time they're wrong, really, you know, and it's like, I mean, every single nutter at Edinburgh thinks they're Begbie, you know, so people grab a hold of me in the pub and go, that's me, that's me, no, it's not, honestly, it's not. And But the worst ones are the guys who actually don't see it, and they'll say there are people like that. Scary. So it's like these. It's that kind of thing, but you don't really know. You still don't know where it comes from. You can maybe see something somebody said or something somebody's done and all that kind of finds its way into a book and sort of resonates. But I think the actual construction of the character, every single one of these characters, I think we've all got these different sort of levels of personality and either choose to sort of overutilise or underutilise them. And I think that they're all in some ways a kind of part of me, some kind of extension of me. And I think every character you write, and it doesn't matter about the age or the gender or the ethnic background or whatever, I think they're all sort of part of you in some way.
Yeah, just
I think they have to be.
extensions.
I think they have to be to work on the page.
Do you find go. Do you find the characters kind of write themselves in a kind of strange way?
Yeah, I mean, it's like they kind of gate crash into other stories because the thing is, it's when I wrote Porno as a sequel to Trainspotting, I didn't intend it to be a sequel.
Right.
And the original guy who was the main character in it was this character, and I realised when I got halfway through the book that it was just Sick Boy had come back into it. And because, and everybody would say that, everybody would say, this character you've written is just the same as Sick Boy, so make him Sick Boy,
Okay.
And it's like kind of, you've got a kind of theme or something that you want to explore in a book, or some kind of story that you want to get to. And often it's like, these are the best tools for that particular job, Right. It's like you think, this is the best way I can do that, And it was like the Skagboys, it was like, this is the best way I can write about the 80s is to use these characters that were pretty much wrecked by the 80s. So that's the way I can kind of explore sort of to my own satisfaction what went on at that time.
No. And Skagboys was written as part of Trainspotting, and you took it out. Is that true?
Yeah.
Because you wanted to start the story when everyone was well in the thick of it.
Well, it's like when I started writing, I didn't really know how to write a book, And some people will say that's not really changed that much, but it's that thing you don't, if you start, you say, how do I write this? And you just find out, by trial and error. And to me, the most sensible thing seemed to do would just be to start off with these characters and put them together and find out who they were and their background. And I just kept writing and writing and writing and writing. I had all this, I had about kind of 300,000 words, which is, they reckon a novel should be about 100,000 words.
Okay.
And I've got about 3 times this for a first novel. So what I did was, I just chopped out the middle bit, and it didn't, just put you right into their world. And I tacked on this heist ending so I could finish it up, and that was Trainspotting.
Okay.
I had these 2 big chunks at either side,
Right.
The other stuff I could cannibalise and use as different stories, but the first part of it, I just had it lying around for a while, and when I decided I was going to write about the 80s, I thought I want to write more about all their family stuff and how they, not so much what happened to them, because what happened to them, they became drug addicts or whatever, but why it happened and what was going on in their family background and in the communities they were living in and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, Trainspotting was about what happened, but Skagboys was about how did it happen. Right. So, you're asking a kind of different question, and it was, I had this big pile of material there that I could start off with. So I had, so it was great to have that to go back into the book, And obviously, I mean, it changed as I rewrote it and all that, but a lot of it kind of, a lot of it was there as it was, yeah.
Oh, wicked.
Did you know that you were working on such an epic work, like when you were doing it? How old were you when you published Trainspotting?
Well, it's strange because when I started writing Trainspotting, I was 28 when I started writing it, and I was writing about being 25. Right. And to me, the difference between being 28 and 25 seemed like a million miles. It seemed like a completely different life, completely different state of mind, and it just seemed to be such a gulf, And then when I started writing, Skagboys, I was 50. And I had gone back to it, and I had this. I was writing about guys that were a bit younger. They were 21, and I thought this is just right off the scale. But in some ways, it's a weird thing because I felt it was easier to write about guys that were 21 being 50 than it was to write about guys, because it's something. If you just live through something, it kind of, you don't have a chance to reflect back on it. It becomes a bit further away from you. Yeah. So it's kind of pulled more into focus now, I think.
And when you finished Trainspotting, so you started at 28. Did it take many years until you published it?
No, it was and this is, it's like, every time I say this, every other kind of writer just kind of hates me because it's like, it was the first thing I wrote seriously. I sat down and wrote, and I finished it pretty quickly, and it got published by the first publisher I sent it off to. And that's really rare.
Yeah.
And I thought this was, I thought this was what happened to everybody.
The way it was,
basically,
yeah.
And this, and you see people, you meet people at literature festivals, and they say, "No, I've been I struggled for 20 years until I got my first novel published." And it's like, and to me that's like kind of these are real writers, because to be able to keep on without that kind of encouragement, I don't know if I would have had the perseverance to do that.
Yeah, that's hard, isn't it?
Very hard,
for those guys to keep doing it and keep getting those knockbacks.
And sometimes it's like, you get somebody else who's maybe published a couple of novels that have disappeared, and then they'll publish one that just goes absolutely crazy. So it's like, it's just, it's almost like when it's your time for that kind of thing. It is, and it can, you're obviously better having that with your first novel, because it opens a lot of doors for subsequent stuff. But I mean, there's so many writers who've just kind of really flourished kind of later on, basically, so.
Yeah.
Did it hurt you in any way, do you think, that your very first book was so big?
No, it was great for me, because if you're a writer, the thing that you really want to do as a writer is to have money, so you can just have the time to write. So now, it's like, you have that cash, you don't have to worry about red bills, you can just get on with doing it. Whereas I think that, and also was kind of at an age where I was just beginning to sort of to grow into my own skin. If it had happened 5 or even 10 years before, I would have gone right off the rails, and I wouldn't have kind of got back into the work. But I realised by then that this is what I wanted to do. Okay. So I was able to kind of focus just on doing the work, rather than sort of getting kind of sidetracked by all the stuff that goes along with it.
When you say that you realised that's what you wanted to do, when you were moving around all these other places, would you constantly write just out of interest, or?
I did when I was kind of wrecked and in a bit of a mess. It's like I started to keep this diary, which was like was the one thing that I could compulsively do.
Right.
And I realised that looking back, that a lot of it was kind of it was nonsense. It was all like kind of self-aggrandising stuff, and kind of putting other people down, and self-justification. But it kind of it was interesting that I was driven to do that. Right. And I think that basically that kind of showed, when I look back on that kind of stuff, it showed me that I was able to write a lot, just physically kind of write stuff out over a long period of time. And I think that when I actually focused on writing the book, that was when I was off. I kind of knew that was like my launch pad into that, basically.
When you actually thought, right, this is what I'm going to do, write a book, and focused all your attention on that.
And I thought, I'm messing around with this kind of sort of diary stuff, and I've got all these wee stories and snapshots in there. Why don't I just sit down and write this as a proper book?
Yeah, of course.
And by then it's like, when you finish it, when you spend that much time and that much effort doing a book, it's a huge chunk out your life. You either think, well, I've done this, I've kind of scratched this itch, and I can just kick back now, or you think this is what I'm here to do, basically. So that was a sort of that book, that kind of period when I started writing the first book was a kind of big turning point for me, I think.
And it soon became, the book became big, and then it soon became a very popular play, right, in Edinburgh.
Yeah. And
then obviously the movie happened that Danny directed. How involved were you in each one of those processes?
It's kind of strange, because when somebody wants to make your book into a play or make it into a film, it's kind of very flattering, but I knew nothing about the worlds of theatre and film at the time, so I was kind of I wanted to let them get on with it. But the guy who Ian Brown, who did the play at the Citizens Theatre, the Traverse Theatre, but he was from the Traverse, but he did it at the Citizens, or maybe it was the other way around. I can't remember, but he wanted me to be involved, so I came along to the rehearsals, and the actors, the guy that had done the adaptation for it used a lot of text basically out the book. And it was good because I got friendly with I got friendly with all the actors, but Ewan Bremner and Susan Vidler were two kind of Edinburgh kind of just based in Edinburgh actors, and they found their way into the film through that connection. And the film was like, Danny, Andrew and John had done Shallow Grave.
Yeah.
And it was this big independent hit.
That was his first film?
That was his
and
first
it did
movie.
very well,
yeah.
right?
And it did, he became that trio together became the people that everybody wanted to work with in film in the UK. And
is it like a director, producer, writer trio?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like they wanted me to be involved in it. And I thought, well, I didn't want to. There was such a good energy between the three of them. I just didn't think that I'd have anything to offer other than sort of nuisance factor. So I basically let them get on with it, and I was glad that I did. I think that every time you get involved in an adaptation of a book, you really have to be able to stand back and let people kind of see it as a movie script. 'Cause they're so different. They're such different animals. If you've written it as a book, it's very hard to kind of to see it as a book, and it sometimes needs another pair of eyes on it.
That must be hard to kind of. I suppose everyone's different, but to kind of let your baby go off and people have so many different visions or so many different takes. So did you actually write the screenplay?
No, I didn't. I gave it. John Hodge who did Shallow Grave.
Okay.
He just had all the ideas to adapt it that seemed to be kind of much more logical than any of mine would have been.
Right.
And I was obsessed. I was writing this book called Marabou's Talk Nightmares at that time, and I was just totally obsessed with that. I was pouring all my energy into that, and I just wouldn't have had anything to give to it. Yeah. They just did such a fantastic job because they saw it as a piece of cinema. The writer usually sees it as a book that has to be adapted.
Yeah.
And has to be compromised in some way. You can't see it in that way. And it took me a long time to get into that frame of mind. It took me like kind of 15 years working in television and film to actually get into that mindset whereby it has to be torn apart, basically. It just has to be ripped open. But you always have to remember that the book's still going to be there. It's still the same book.
It's still that's still the source.
That still exists as an entity. You're not destroying that entity. You're just you're just kind of ripping it up to use parts of it.
I suppose it depends who gets hold of it, because you get the Hollywood types who all want to justify their job. Like you hear some horror stories, don't you?
Well, in some ways, James, it's a kind of win-win situation for the writer, because if they make a real mess of it, you can say, "Oh, they fucked up my beautiful book. Why did he do this to me?" And just to disassociate yourself from it. But if it's great, you can say, "Oh well, I gave them this great source material. They were laughing. How could they have failed?" So it just really depends on depends on the relationship you have with them. And the guy who did Filth, John Baird, it was a similar type of thing. He had this tremendous enthusiasm and energy for it, and he used to kind of email me back and forward with all these scenarios and how he thought that the screenplay should be. And I just kind of said to him, "Well, get on with it. You're the guy to do this."
Yeah.
And,
that's your movie coming out with James McAvoy in October.
Yeah.
And that's an adaptation from one of your books, Filth.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. We had John Ronson here, and he did The Men Who Stare at Goats, and he said I was on set for 2 days. He's like, the first day everyone was nice to me, and the second day I realized I had no place on this set because it's out of my hands. He said even the screenwriter wasn't on set. He's like, once you give it to the director.
Yeah, the director. It's a weird thing. There's basically any film. There's kind of three authors of it. There's the writer. Well, four if it's a writer. The writer and screenwriter are different. There's the writer, the screenwriter who adapts it. There's a director, and then there's the editor. The editors are really is like the fourth writer, the third or fourth writer, because they make so many decisions about how the thing looks. Because there's so much material shot.
Well, they're deciding what's going to be shown at the end of the day, I suppose.
They're deciding what's going to be used in terms of the material, but they're also deciding the whole pace and mood of it and how it will look and how it will fit and the energy, and obviously with the director as well. But I mean, editing's it's such a kind of weird, mysterious process. I mean, there's no real book about how to be an editor, basically. And I think because of that, it's not a lot of people really understand it, you know. It's just, it's all about storytelling and pacing, and so, but the editor, what I've seen in the kind of like the 4 adaptations I've been involved with my own stuff, and the other movies that I've kind of been involved with and TV stuff, it's like I've just kind of, my whole view has changed about editors has changed. I mean, I just originally thought they were the guys that the director told them what to do, and they just conceived the director's vision, but they come to it with so many ideas as well about the story.
Wow, that's interesting. When you saw the first screening of Trainspotting, what were your thoughts, honestly?
Oh, it was what happened was I took a lot of friends like guys like Jeff Barrett from Heavenly Records and Paolo Hewitt, guys for Primal Scream, Andrew Innes, Bobby Gillespie, all these guys that have been really big into the book and were really into the whole, like kind of sort of London cognoscenti sort of rock and roll guys, okay. Which apart from an audience in Scotland would be the most critical audience that it could get, and I think at first when they sort of, because everybody's got their own view of what the actors will look like, when they see these different characters visualised, they're going, no, that's not Begbie, or that's not, that's because they've got their own visualisation of it. And then about 10 minutes in, you just felt the energy in the room started to change, and everybody just bought right into this, and they were totally engrossed in it, and they came out all, it's amazing, it's like, so we just had a great kind of feel about it, it's a really sort of strong, positive kind of feeling about it, that the idea that it was really going to do well.
Did you know who the actors were, the decisions? Did you know what Danny was doing in the background?
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew Bobby and I knew Ewan and from the other stuff that they'd done, and I knew Ewan Bremner and Susan Fiddler from the play.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it just the casting. I mean, Danny will say this, that the biggest part of directing is casting. If you get the cast, if you get the film cast properly, it just cuts down the number of ways you can fuck up. Like if it's not cast properly, you're really kind of firefighting. You're trying to pull something. You're trying to make an actor believe, and you're trying to make the audience believe that this person really is this character when they don't quite believe it themselves.
Yeah.
So you need somebody who's really completely immersed in that part and can really pull it off. And so it's such an important thing, But it had that kind of energy, and it had that. I always think that they brought that kind of visual energy, and Danny brings that kind of visual stylization to it that Shallow Grave had, and why it had the plus, the kind of add-on that I brought was basically the characters, put into that kind of scenario. And the energy in the book was just completely kind of coterminous with their energy as filmmakers, so it just really dovetailed perfectly.
Wow, that's such a special moment.
Yeah, I remember hearing it was about drugs and hearing it was kind of glorifying, and I always remember watching the shot where the injecting the heroin into the vein, and dirty, and everyone just went, ugh, like the whole audience, and I thought, how's that glorifying anything?
Yeah,
that's not glorifying it. And then obviously the dying baby area, I thought that's not glorifying it, that's how it is.
Well, it's a weird thing, because when all that started out, there was so much criticism about this, and then now you look at the way that all the health education stuff in Britain about kind of drugs education, it's exactly like a miniature Trainspotting. It shows all the big highs and why people get involved, and it shows the lows and what happens to them when they get immersed in it. So I think it was kind of it was successful in that way, And the interesting thing is, it's now everybody kind of loves Trainspotting. It's become this kind of heritage thing, but a lot of people really hated it at the time, And the same thing's going to happen with Filth. There's going to be a small kind of number of people that really hate it on a kind of visceral level, but that kind of happened with Trainspotting too,
Irving, you write about such dark stuff, and this is somebody on YouTube asked this question for you, but you don't seem like a dark guy.
I think it's because I think it's like, I don't know, I mean, I kind of feel that I'm not really. I feel that I'm kind of quite a light, sort of happy-go-lucky type of guy, but I think in some ways you have to be to look at kind of darker stuff. You know, you have to kind of be able to put it in a place. You know, if you were living like that with all that stuff in your head all the time, I don't think it would do you any good. And I wouldn't mean it's like, it's weird because I remember when I lived in Dublin, this pal, she teaches at University College, and she used to get all the guys for the jail to come in and do this class and all that, you know. And these guys, they wrote the most beautiful poetry about kind of flowers and sort of hills and heather and dancing. And she goes, I want to see stuff about, you know, what your life, and I get that. And they were like just horrified at the idea that you would write that, you know. And kind of writing from them was like in some ways an escape from the darkness, basically. Cool. You know, so I think that when I was in a dark place in my life, I just wouldn't have had the mental kind of strength or stamina to be able to do that, or the desire, really, you know.
To be consistent enough to actually string something together like as big as a book.
Just to get away from it a wee bit, James, and give yourself that distance and that bit of perspective, you know. And to be able to laugh at it a bit, you know, I think you've got to, all your own kind of vanities and foibles, the most stupid thing in the world, and you've got to have a laugh at them, you know.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big characters in Trainspotting is heroin, and I know you talked about like from the miners' strike to like the social housing in Leith, and then the heroin that arrived on the market. And obviously you had intimate knowledge of that, and I was just wondering what your relationship was with drugs at the time, or with your friends that did drugs.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the weird thing I always found about heroin for me was a very guilty thing, because it was something that it wasn't in the culture at the time. I mean, when I went through a period when I went back down here to London, and you know, I'd got myself sort of straightened out. And when I came back up, it was everywhere, and all these guys who used to laugh at me and say, "What are you doing? You know, what are you doing? You're on that Skag again. Come for a pint. You're daft and all that." You know. Right. And then when I got back, so many of these guys had got involved in all this because there was nothing else. You know, everything had just kind of crumbled basically. And to me, it was like it was something that was. I can't really blame it on anything or anybody else. It was basically my own stupidity and my own not really having the, you know, I think when you're younger, you don't really have the emotional vocabulary to express things that are going on with you, you know. And I'd kind of, I mean, I had like kind of family issues with bereavement and family, you know, and issues with kind of relationship breakdown and stuff like that. And you just think, well, here I am with a bunch of guys that are shooting smack and they seem to be fine, everything's great in their life, you know, they're just sitting looking and staring at walls and all that, but they don't seem to be in any kind of pain or angst of, you know. So on one level that's very appealing to kind of to get into that, but
to tune out.
All these things, all these kind of short-term pains of kind of like, you know, bereavement, relationship breakdown, employment loss, all that kind of stuff goes. But if you've got a smack habit, that's still there to deal with. You know, you can't really, and it does. You know, it's like the whole thing is intensified when you're trying to get on with your life. And what I kind of found with me was that there was nothing really kind of fueling it or driving it beyond that. It was just something that I'd got into in quite a kind of basically an ignorant way. I mean, the whole thing back then, there was no kind of health education, or there was no knowledge about drugs. I mean, I remember, my mum and dad used to say to me, "I hope you're not smoking dope, or I hope you're not smoking cannabis." I hear there's a lot of that, you know, happening around it, you know, out there in the streets and kind of, you know, your scooter. I've never seen cannabis. I never even knew what that was, like, you know. I mean, I'd kind of, I think I maybe smoked cannabis about once before I'd taken heroin, and I'd probably drank about 1 million pints of Guinness or something, like, you know. Yeah. So I mean, it's like, you know, and 1 million cups of tea, you know. So they were more likely to have led to as cannabis.
Yeah. The whole gateway thing. I think you put that perfectly. I mean,
was it an underground scene at that point, the heroin scene, and the parents really didn't know what was going on?
Yeah, I don't think very that many people knew, and it was like there was a bunch of guys around about Leith who were involved in that, and I don't know what the whole kind of background to that was. I always thought it was something to do with the port and all that, you know, something to do with a kind of port culture, and but I don't know what it was, and but also in Edinburgh, is, there's like the complication that Edinburgh produced all the pharmaceutical heroin for the whole of the UK. It still does. There's the factory in Gorgie that makes all this stuff, and it's all to do with it comes right back to the Scottish Enlightenment and medicine and the university and the Industrial Revolution. It's all still made there. I think that there was such a ready supply in it, because I think a lot of guys that worked there were just taking it out, because there was no security in these days. Nobody really saw it as being. It's like an idea that you work in a paracetamol factory and you're going home with bags of paracetamol, or Ascot or Anadin or something like that.
Wow. So that's why it was so big in Leith.
That's why I think it became so big there. Yeah.
I never heard of that before.
Because it was pharmaceutical. Did you think? I mean, I'm kind of talking about the purity of the drug. Would it, by the time you got it, was it pharmaceutical, or was it so cut and?
I think originally, when it hit the streets of Edinburgh, it was very, very pure, because nobody knew anything about cutting it. There was and there was no real criminal infrastructure to do that at the time. Nobody had any knowledge of it, if they had of. And then it's like. There was I think obviously what happened was that the local supply, obviously the breaches in security had been stopped by the plant, and that's when all the massive importation of cheap Pakistani heroin into not just Edinburgh but the whole of the UK took in. And I remember kind of these guys that I knew back up home, they were kind of they were pulling out wraps of heroin, and I was thinking, what's all this weird brown stuff? Why are you taking it? And
started off white, the pure stuff.
We used to call it China white, and we believed it was from China. It was from Gorgie.
And down the road.
Was there something cool about doing it when no one else knew what you guys were doing?
I think there was part of that as well. I mean, it was like that thing that growing up, and sort of like kind of Bowie and sort of Lou Reed and all that kind of music, there was a sort of there was a kind of cachet about doing lots of drugs and sort of kind of hanging out in this little kind of cult of kind of sort of wasted bad boys that nobody really knew what you were quite knew what you were up to, and it was quite mysterious and enigmatic and all that sort of stuff. But I think there's and then again it was it was before this is before all the HIV connection was made too, so it wasn't seen as and because the stuff was relatively pure then. There wasn't the kind of there wasn't so much the danger of overdose. I mean, that would come kind of later on too,
Okay. And when you saw that movie for the first time, and you saw Ewan McGregor up there, Robert Carlyle, Kelly MacDonald, Johnny Lee Miller, did you know that these were going to be kind of superstars? I mean, these guys are all still around today. Kelly's on Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah. Well, they've all done well. I mean, Bobby was probably the most well-known actor at the time.
Okay.
But excuse me.
Yeah, no worries.
But I remember seeing Ewan in something. I think it was one of the Dennis Potter things, and he was just a very young guy.
Okay.
And him and Dougie Henshaw, another great Scottish actor, were in this, and they were both playing Cockneys in this Dennis Potter thing. But they were both very good. And I remember seeing a feature on them. And it was one of the Scottish local papers, and it had these things about these two guys or two actors to watch. And I thought they probably are, because they can utterly convince me that they were Cockneys, basically, and they're playing these kind of Cockney squaddies. And it was so kind of they've both done really well. I mean, Dougie wasn't in Trainspotting, but. Yeah, and obviously, I mean, Kelly was just she was just a young girl. And
she was really young, right?
And they kind of they leafleted around all the nightclubs in Glasgow to get her into it. It was and she hadn't really done anything like that before.
Really?
And now, I mean, she's probably one of the most accomplished actors around. She's like kind of somebody that everybody wants to work with. She's just like a natural talent.
Yeah.
And we're just really lucky to find her.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, if you hire those great actors, then the director doesn't have to be worried about all this stuff. You know Ewan's going to show up and be that guy and lose the weight and be skinny, and
they're going to perform. I mean, and it's like the thing when you see him. I mean, he was like this. He had all this long hair and all that. He's this kind of good-looking guy with long hair, and he just cut it off and lost all this weight. And that's like kind of that's quite a bold statement to make for a young actor, because you think. you're getting all this attention from Shallow Grave. You know, you could be doing these big costume dramas that, you know, they sell to America and Britain, and you get massively paid for them. But he really went into it. You know, he went into it with that kind of total dedication.
That's fantastic. What a lucky moment that was for all that to happen. But yeah, there was a lot of controversy when it came out. I remember Bob Dole was running for president in '96, and he was saying bad things about the movie, although he claimed he never saw it. And it was you must have gotten a lot of heat.
I love Bob Dole. You know, he basically kind of
you don't hear that every day.
No, he gave me an American presence.
Right.
And so far, there's never been any other American presidential candidate has done that for me. You know, I just keep it's a godsend for a writer. You know, some major politician, particularly one that's not even read the book, starts just kind of or seen the film, start slagging it off. It's
perfect.
Fantastic.
So you were telling us earlier how it was really a viral phenomenon. Like at first the Scots saw Trainspotting and they loved it because it was representing them, and they watched it, and then it spread slowly to the UK and then the world. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty quickly in terms of the movie, because it's like anything that you've got. I mean, if you look at, it's similar to Ireland. If you live in a small country and something comes out that's from your place, you really take a big ownership of it. I noticed when I was in Ireland, In Bruges was out, you know, and everybody in Dublin just went to see the movie again and again and again, you know, and that kind of basically kind of distorted figures at the box office for that sales territory. And kind of Trainspotting was the way, you know, it kind of bumped it up, and everybody said, well, this is the cool hot movie to go and see. So it has that kind of cascade effect. And I think you have to kind of it's quite strange in a way that somebody can start off in a place that's seen as quite a small place, a small country, and just kind of extend out from there. And I think that's the way these things operate. You know, it's there another film that did that when I was in Ireland. That film Once. Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's the guy from The Frames kind of playing the guitar, and it's a kind of romance story. But everybody seemed to see that film in Dublin, you know, time after time again, and it gives it that kind of profile. So yeah, I mean that phenomena I think is always working.
Did you like In Bruges?
I enjoyed In Bruges. Yeah, I thought that Colin Farrell was magnificent in it. I thought, you know, I mean, he really made that movie by kind of acting out of a straitjacket, because you can't have somebody kind of shooting a kid and then being a sympathetic character, but and in a comedy as well, you know. Yeah. But he managed to pull that off. It's incredible. Some of the acting gymnastics that he does in that movie are absolutely amazing.
It's amazing. And this is a guy that, like you said, is a leading man in his spare time, and yet he stuck himself into this role, you know, where he's anything but. And I love that movie. It's just original screenplay, and yeah, it's fantastic to watch. Do you go ahead? Go.
So I asked for questions on my. I'll put it out there on Facebook, and one guy was asking. He seemed to have must have seen an interview or got the impression that you thought Filth was your weakest work. He wanted to know why that was, if it is, and he thought it was one of your strongest pieces.
I was probably being really contrary in interviews, because see what happens when you do press is that you maybe do about 10 interviews in a day, and you know, if somebody says like, you know, kind of like what's your strongest book, you know, and you'll say something like, oh, Filth, definitely, you know, what do you think of Trainspotting as a movie? Oh, they did a great job, you know. Then by the end of the day, you keep on, you know, responding the same way to the same questions. You think, I'm going to fuck around with this a bit, you know, and you just get fed up with the sound of your own voice and say, nah, they messed up my book, you know. You know, and it's like, sometimes it's like, that's why I like doing this kind of thing, because irony doesn't always work in print. You know, you can make a fool of yourself kind of trying to be smart, and the journalist just writes it deadpan. Yeah. So I think that, and you do want to mix it up a wee bit, you know. Right. But yeah, I've always been proud of Filth. I always thought it was a really kind of strong book.
You were just trying to entertain yourself, basically.
I think so, yeah.
Just fucking with people. I hope you're not just maybe.
It's harder to do. It's harder to do in a podcast. It's harder to do in kind of in video than it is to do in print.
Yeah, no, I guess that's probably true.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, obviously you live in the States now, and I want to hear about what you think of America. You know, but obviously we have all this oxycondone and all of these own opiates now that are so big in Florida and the rest of the states in a weird, maybe similar way as what you saw happening in Leith, say 20 years ago. And do you have thoughts on it? Have you ever thought about writing anything about it?
It's kind of, I mean, America's a really strange place to live right now because there's so many, it's for the first time, I think what they say about America now is that this generation of Americans are going to be the first generation that'll be poorer than their parents, which is quite a psychological kind of blow for a nation that's kind of used to having this kind of sense of progression and entitlement and sort of
American dreams.
And I think it's also, it's really divided the country. I think it feels, even more so than Britain, it feels very divided. Divided amongst kind of economic groups, but also divided amongst generations. It just seems to be very old versus new there, and it's really kind of such an interesting place to be. I'm kind of enjoying being there, and it's like the whole thing about the rise of electronic dance music there has been strange as well. And it's like you've got all the kind of cocktails of these drugs, like not just MDMA, but you're talking about things like bath salts and kind of the massive crystal meth kind of thing they've got going on there. So it just seems to be a really, really strange and interesting place to be at the moment.
I always find it strange how, like, over in America, like we don't have a meth problem. I don't know why we don't have them. You can make meth. I'm not quite sure how to do it. I'll try a bit later, but I wonder why that is.
It's always kind of struck me as being strange as well. A kind of sort of cheap, really kind of powerful, crazy drug that seems to be kind of very British. It seems to be like high street kind of madness.
It's got Scotland all over, hasn't it?
I know, I'm disappointed in people here.
Go on, Scotland, put this
so long.
But
I mean, I don't know why. I mean, it just seems to have been. When I first encountered it was in San Francisco, and it was like it was that thing. It was like it was a gay thing. But it was also a lot of young women, a lot of yuppie women that were into it. It was quite a strange thing. And now it's like, now so much of it has come about with people working long hours and long shifts. It's like kind of truck drivers, nurses and all that, that are just want to keep going. They just have to keep going,
It's funny how those drugs, they cross classes. They can do it really quick. And you might have even seen it in Scotland, but you get something like crack. Okay, it's the ghetto drug, it's this drug, and then all of a sudden, like the bankers are smoking.
Yeah, the bankers are into it. Yeah,
it leaps some weird leap like that. Like you said, with meth, it starts off being.
And it's always this way. It's like what I noticed in Miami is that they've basically built a new kind of crack pipe, which is like takes all the kind of sting out of the meth, allegedly, but it takes all the kind of badness and the sootiness of the throat and all that stuff. So it's like it's become almost a kind of louche thing for the kind of the sort of yuppie classes now. They can sit and it's like it's actually quite nice watching the sun go down. Instead of all this kind of.
What is the weirdest thing about living in Chicago?
I think the weirdest thing for me is like, as you know, James, I've got obsessed with Twitter in the last year, and I've just got really into it in a big way. And I think it's because it keeps me in touch with the whole sensibility back over here in the UK. It's like people just see things in a different way, and the humour's different, and it's like what happens is that if you get too obsessed with it, though, you actually go back into the UK timeline. So I'm thinking, like, what am I doing at 6 o'clock, I should be sitting down at my tea. I'm arguing with all these trolls that are half cut because it's 12 o'clock at night, midnight. They're all staggering around up their face and all that. So it's like you do get into this kind of strange timeline. You'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch the football and all that, and you'll start tweeting. Everybody's like kind of they're all at the game or something like that. It's a kind of it's a strange thing, and it's like in some ways it makes it easier to be there. It makes you kind of less homesick, but in other ways it's probably in the long run maybe making you more homesick because you're less inclined to adjust to real life.
It's a hard one to balance, isn't it? How do Americans get on with your accent? Because with mine, they have a hard time. So.
Yeah, they don't understand me. It's like they kind of think, I mean, I'm the only guy who can say to somebody that my wife doesn't understand me, and it's not a chat-up line, it's just a purely descriptive thing. You know? But I mean, they think everything. They go, "Are you Irish? Are you Australian? Are you English?" You know, it's like so. It's it's maybe one or two people who've been there will pick it up straight away, but very, very rare.
Does it bother you the way they butcher the English language at all? No, come on, Brian. Come on, Brian. I'm sorry. Sorry, it's just a little thing, man. I'm sorry. I love Americans, but
I have a British passport, so fuck you.
no, mate. You're one of us. You can slag the Americans off with us. You're invited.
I could do both. Yeah, go ahead.
No, but sorry. Obviously,
I noticed. I mean, it's like but I'm doing this book now that comes out in April, and the two characters are American, and they're both women, and I've written it in first person, but it never struck me as how many kind of words are different. You know, it's like if I, like over there, the worktops in the kitchen.
Yeah.
They don't have a word for worktops. We call them countertops. Nobody was. If you say, "I'm just going over to the worktop there," nobody would know what you meant.
What word was that? The what top?
The worktop.
Worktop. Oh, they don't have that, so they don't
Yeah,
know what you're talking
excellent.
about.
See, you never knew what it was.
It's proof.
So you really have to change your language and stuff.
Yeah, I sound. I wouldn't say I sound quite posh there, but it's just when I've been in Edinburgh for a week, so that's all gone now. But it's like when the wife always says, like, in the taxi, you just change as soon as you get from the airport to the taxi, and you kind of you lose that sort of. I don't think it's so much that I try to speak different, but I just try to speak slower so that people understand what I'm saying.
Okay. So you're writing this latest book that comes out in April. Will you write in a version for Americans to consume in American English?
No, it's all in American English. This has been the difficult thing. So I'll rely on you to tell me kind of how it's working out.
Well, I mean, most people, if you haven't read Trainspotting, it's written as in like a phonetic way of the way they speak in Scotland, right?
It's also, I mean, it's like people think because you're Scottish, it's easier, but it's not, because it's the way the words on the page are written. Right. You're not used to seeing words on a page like that. So everybody, when they get into it, I think they have to, for the first few pages, almost say it out loud.
Right, yeah,
Doesn't matter, whether you're Scottish or Italian or Australian. I think you have to do the same things.
And you decided that's the way you were going to write it.
Well, when I started off doing Trainspotting, I tried to write it in a kind of, I tried to write it in some kind of standard English. And it seemed to be so pretentious because the characters just weren't coming into my head in that way. So I was just losing so much of the power of it. I felt,
Yeah, and that is a big power of Trainspotting is how truthful it is, isn't it? So no, I see that. You need to keep the characters.
Yeah, and just that kind of the language is it's a weird thing because it's the Scottish thing. It's like from that kind of oral, sort of Celtic oral storytelling tradition. That so much of it is performative. People don't just tell a story; they perform it. They go to a pub and everybody's up and down. They're doing all this kind of stuff, and it's like, and you can't if you lose that. If you just go to standard English, you completely lose all that side of it.
It's really part of the culture. I remember when I visited Edinburgh for the first time, and I had never heard anyone say, I, and it's so loud and everything. I mean, I know James, you say it a lot, but it is part of the culture, and it also defines you from the English, doesn't it? It's like we're not like the English. We have our own thing. And if you're an American listening to this right now, I was wondering, could you describe the relationship between the Scottish and the English?
I think it's like the relationship between the Scottish and the English. I think is a really good one. I think it's between Scots and other Scots. I mean, every friend that I have that's English that I've brought up to Scotland, they always say, "Why is it you guys love visitors?" Because they make a big fuss at anybody, wherever they come from. There's visitors. But you just hate each other. Why is it you hate each other? I don't know really. And I think it's without getting kind of too political about it. I think it's to do with this kind of status of Scotland. Being not quite a nation yet, and I think it's part of that kind of growing up thing. I think once if it does become independent, I think that that'll be a kind of stepping stone towards kind of growing up and being a bit sort of. A bit more kind of happy in our own skin, and I've noticed that with the younger generation, it's not like that at all. It's been that post kind of house kind of rave generation. It's a whole different attitude.
Okay. Yeah, you are the history of your nation. You carry it around with you. Me as an American, I carry around that history. It's kind of into your psyche, and you
haven't
don't
got
even
much
know
history though of the American, have you?
Yeah, a couple hundred years.
You're a bit skimpy on
Couple
this.
hundred years. But I must find like my grandparents were farmers and ranchers, and like there's this a mentality in America that if you work hard enough you can get something, because he was always like go west and plant something and you can build something. So I think that whole like optimism, entrepreneurial spirit just comes from almost the geographic layout of America.
And just having the option to keep moving, keep going, and keep trying.
Whereas, for hundreds of years in England and Scotland, I'm sorry, that piece of land is owned by that clan and that's owned by that guy. So fuck you. You got to do this. So it's just a weird thing. Are you for Scottish independence?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way it's kind of going. I mean, it seems to me that I don't know if it's going to happen next year. I think it's maybe a bit kind of too soon at the referendum. But I think that I just feel that it's like the union of Scotland and England is seems to be in a kind of secular decline. I think people are more proud to be English rather than British now, and people are more proud to be Scottish rather than British. And I think it's just that way that it's almost like they've got to find their own kind of destiny, really. It's that kind of thing. They've got to, it's almost like a post-imperial thing. There's no empire now. There's no industry. All the things that kind of bound Scotland and England together. There's no welfare state. So it's like all these things that kind of held us together in the two world wars and the esprit de corps of all that have kind of gone. So I think they're kind of reverting back to their original identities, basically.
I like how with someone like Andy Murray, if he wins the US Open, he's British. If he loses, he's Scottish. Keep it like that.
That's how it works.
I like it that way. Do you know what I mean? It suits him that.
I thought you might like that.
James is a writer, and you are aspiring to write a book. And you just said that you wrote from the first person point of an American woman. And how do you do something like that, or how do you even advise people of how they can become that character? It seems very hard.
It's kind of weird, but a lot of people do that kind of thing. They have this idea for a character that's kind of nothing like them, and I think that for me, I had to kind of I had to write quite close to my comfort zone before I could kind of move out a little bit. And but it's funny. It's like so much of it, the characters I always find so much of it is kind of superficial, like gender and social class and nationality. It's like it's the kind of spirit and the essence of the character of the human being that really comes out, hopefully, when you try and write and you try and do that, And then after that, once you've got the character down, you're basically just trying to authenticate it with details. And it's just a lot of research and listening to people and giving it to Americans to read, basically, and saying, what do you think of this? What's working? What's not? What's kind of and just doing as much of that as you possibly can. Yeah.
Did you could you have written this book if you hadn't lived in Chicago the last 3 years?
Probably not. I don't think I would have had the desire to do it, and because it's set in Miami, and it's more Miami than Chicago that inspires me to write. I mean, I love living in Chicago, but I feel that it's an old kind of city, and I feel that it's kind of ossified in terms of all the cultural relationships. I mean, people I go to. There's the guys I go out drinking with, the guys I go to the boxing with, the guys I go to the cinemas with, and all that. And it's like there's a different crowd, but everybody has their place and they know where everything is. Whereas Miami, it's just such a kind of mixed up town. Everybody comes in there, and I thought, well, I've got a kind of place here. I mean, my kind of view of it is probably as good as any other incomers, but not like that in Chicago. I mean, there's so many good writers that are so much steeped in, there's so much steeped in the traditions of Chicago. It would be impossible for me to kind of catch up with that. But not in Miami. There's no real traditions in Miami. It's just everything is just new. Everything is just kind of up for grabs.
Miami's insane.
That's what I thought you were. I thought that's where you lived in Miami. You were there for some point?
I've got a place in Miami as well, and Chicago's awfully cold in the winter, James. Be there in the winter,
So I lived in Chicago.
Too much like Scotland.
Yeah, I lived in Chicago for 2 years.
But you want to trade up in the weather.
I can imagine you'd be there. I worked for a bank in Chicago for 2 years, and I love Chicago, and I love the people in Chicago. But if I would have told you one city that Irvine Welsh lives in, I would have been like, not Chicago, because it's not what you'd say a dynamic city. There are these kind of relationships that this is the way it's been for a long time, and this is the way it's been, and it's kind of Midwest. And for the Midwest, it's one of the best cities for the Midwest, but it's not exactly dynamic. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's changed a lot in the last 3 years since I've been there, and I think that it's probably changed a lot at the expense of a lot of the other towns in the Midwest, like Detroit and Minneapolis and Cincinnati, Milwaukee, because it's become more of a regional capital. You know, you tend to get a lot of people flooding from these towns into Chicago now. Whereas in Chicago, the only place you want to go if you want to kind of make it, whatever that is, means like, you know, you go to New York or LA. But so many people regionally come to Chicago. You know?
What is your writing process? How do you write?
I usually work on lots of different things at once, and then I get to a critical mass with something. I think this is the thing I've got to go with. And that's the kind of horrible bit, you know, the rest is just procrastination and fun, you know, you're building something up. I think, I've really got to make this actually happen. It's got to be a book, or it's got to be a screenplay. I can't just ponce around with it anymore. I've got to turn it into that, you know. And that's the horrible part, because that's when it becomes like real work. You just got, you know, you just so then the regime becomes completely different. It's not about just getting up and doodling away and having fun and all that. It's about just thinking about, you know, mapping off the days and the weeks and the months and all that, and saying, this is my deadline I'm going to set, and this is how I'm going to do that, and getting up on the wall and saying, this is the first act, this is the second, this is the third, this is all my little charts and diagrams, and kind of going back.
Right,
and
so you do that like almost like
yeah,
a military operation.
Yeah, no, it is. It's crime watch basically.
It must be.
It is real, especially with the characters I do. It's like a police. It becomes like a police operating room. You go in there.
Do you have like pictures of the characters or descriptions?
Yeah,
of the
I
characters?
do have pictures, descriptions. I mean, I do not so much pictures, but I do drawings. I can do little sketches of people. You know, how I imagine the person to look like.
Like really to bring them to, literally to bring them to life.
Bring them to life, and I make up a tape for every one of them. I make up a playlist, what they're going to listen to, and I have that on when I'm writing the character. You know?
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
That's brilliant.
Well, I think you make them. To me, it's like you make them more real. You know, and it's. I think the thing about writing is it's such a kind of weird thing because you're spending all this time in a room with people that don't exist. I mean, that's a great definition of insanity, isn't it? It's a perfect working definition of insanity. And I think that, you know, the only evidence you've got that it exists are these kind of little things you've written about them on the walls, or the drawings of them, or the kind of the tapes you've made about them. And I think to make them really real and to make them come to life on the page, I think you have to go into that kind of detail.
Really under the microscope.
Yeah, really get into it as much
I think
as you can.
people, that discerning reader, they know when something's real. And like when they see the movie, they know that there's reality in those characters, and that's what they buy into. And I think the consuming public is a lot more intelligent than most people give credit. I think.
Yeah, you know? It's interesting because it's kind of like what you see, the kind of Hollywood blockbusters where you have your hero and the villain, and you get the girl, and you know, a lot of people are just spoon-fed this, and do they watch it because that's the only thing they've got to watch, and then something they've
got to make it back in the first weekend. Right. You know what I mean? So it's saturation, it's publicity, it's kind of saturation, PR saturation, to make sure all that money that the studio spent comes back on that weekend. Because as soon as word of mouth kicks in, and people go like, "Oh, it's all right, it's not great," you know. That's the film dead. You know, it's like the second week. It's gone. You know, the box office is gone.
That seems to happen with so many movies. Like I watch a trailer for a movie and I'll be like, I don't need to fucking see it. I know what happens. There's no surprises. That seems like.
You know, the thing that the studios always say is that, you know, and it's, you know, the kind of unwritten sort of unspoken law is that the studio movies, the trailer has always got to be better than the movie. It's always got to be better.
Is that like thing, is it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you're in America now, and television is creating some amazing things in America. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on that kind of a series, things, you know, whether it be Boardwalk Empire or Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones. And would you ever do something?
Yeah, I've been trying to get my snout into that particular trough for years, like, you know, and I've kind of been working on two different projects. One based in the Appalachians and the other one based in Miami again. So I've just been working with different partners and TV people to try and get things like that on the go, you know.
So you get that to a point, you get your kind of your basis, your kind of meat and potatoes, if you will, and then you'll go out with your contacts, different people, what do you think of this, and then see if you can flesh it out, see if anyone's buying.
Yeah, basically that's it. You know, you just get working with some producers that you really like, and usually I think to get any kind of project on the go, you've got to get. It's like nobody's going to. It's one of these things. Nobody's going to take one person seriously. But if you've got if you've got a decent writer, a decent producer, a decent director, and maybe a couple of actors that you know are interested in it. Not so much with TV. You don't so much package it with actors with TV, but maybe more of a decent production company that's got a track record with TV, or a showrunner that's got that kind of profile. Then you've got a much more of a shout of getting people interested.
Especially with a backlog of work like you have too, that you know.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
I bet people think it's Irvine Welsh can snap his fingers and get something made, but I'm sure you find it difficult to make any projects. Right?
No, it's almost. I mean, it's like kind of. It's just really, really difficult to do, and you have to. Nobody's. I mean, people are interested. All the people want from a writer is quality. They're not interested in who you are. They're interested in the script. You know, if you can't deliver a script, then, and if the script's only average, and a lot of the scripts I have done have been average. You know, it's like you just it's never going to work out every time. But I think that. But if you have a decent script, then you have a decent producer, then you have kind of a decent director. You have that kind of. You almost have that kind of series of building blocks that you put in place. Right. But it's still as hard. I mean, it's hard in a lot of ways. I mean, I've got an agent out in Hollywood now, and I've got a manager out there, and that's been really helpful. And it's been good to actually get into that that whole thing of kind of being more serious about it rather than just kind of doing a script on spec and sending it into some studio. Right. But so yeah, that's been very helpful. But I don't think there's any writer in the world who can get something made like that. You have to be part of a package.
Sorry to rewind a bit. So once you've written it, you're also putting together people. You kind of you have an idea, you write something, you contact people that you think would be interested to work with you, or it's the other way around. You know, they might come to you and say, like, I've got this great idea, you know, how do you fancy being attached as a writer, you know, and come and produce it with us and all, you know. And sometimes it's like, I mean, the agency that I'm rep by, CAA, they don't just represent writers, they do producers, actors as well. Right. So they often come out, have an idea and try and package people together. Right. You know, that's what they do, basically, the talent brokers, you know.
So it really helps having an agent.
Oh, but it's like when I first went after Trainspotting, everybody wanted to meet me out there and work with me, and it was like, you know, and because I never had an agent, a literary agent, I thought I don't need a film agent, you know, and so I would go there kind of just this daft laddie, basically, you know, we want to work with you. This is fantastic stuff. Who's your agent? And, I've not got one. I don't need one. This guy is an idiot. Send the village idiot back to this village in Scotland that he came from. You know. So this time now, I do it incredibly different. You know, it's a whole different approach to it. You know, I've got the agent, the manager, and all that, and we try and sort of look at any. If I do a book, we'll look at what the crossover potential for adaptation is, or for big screen or TV. It's all done in quite a kind of systematic way. And if there is none, we'll just move on to the next thing, or we'll do an original thing, whatever. Yeah.
What would you say? What was it? Like, this might be a quite convoluted question, but what's the big difference between writing a book and a screenplay? What would you say? Like, no, but I know that's a big question. I
think with a screenplay, you're always much more conscious of structure. It's a 3-act structure, and it's more about because you're thinking about it in pictures, about telling the story in pictures. Right. It's more about a visual sense of how it's going to sort of look and how one scene's going to unfold into the next, and how you can tell. You have to tell a story in a screenplay with much fewer characters and fewer scenes. So you're looking at how you can kind of how you can make that kind of still sort of punchy and dynamic enough, but to give as much detail about the characters as you can.
Grow the characters while getting the story out there.
Whereas the book itself, I think with screenwriting for me anyway, it sort of starts off more about process, and then you try and build in the content. Whereas books, it's all about content. You're just writing away there, and you think, I've got to actually write this thing as a book. How do I fix this mess? How do I kind of knock it into some sort of semblance of order? It's a completely different. It's the same thing, but kind of going it from
completely
roundabout ways.
Completely different. That's interesting.
You talked about getting feedback on your writing. I think on this book, this American book you were talking about. Who do you use for feedback? Is it your wife? Is it your agent? Friends? And how do you deal with that?
Usually, in the first instance, it's my editor. And that's like, I've had the same guy as been my editor for 20 years, and it's kind of it's probably it's the longest relationship either of us have had, basically. So it's kind of strange, but and he's the guy that I would kind of trust to give me the kind of the broad brush about is the story working or the characters working, and the rest is like the kind of details, and then you start going to people that. I tend to write the thing and then research it afterwards. So I'll go. I'll say that. I'll write something, and I don't want to research something if it's not going to be good. I want to say, the story. Let the story work first, and then I'll go back and I'll start researching some of the details to make it kind of fly a bit more.
Right. See if you have to change it, or see how you can change it for the
better.
better.
There's no point in doing extra work you don't have to do.
No, I see that.
What do you think of Hollywood?
It's like, I just see it as a kind of, it's a factory town. Like Newcastle is all about coal, it's all about film, it's about making movies and TV programs, and that's what they do. I don't, it's like I think sometimes it's like, it's like anything like that has that kind of position of dominance in an industry, it gets very kind of self-referential and all that sort of stuff. But I think, I always say that I met, when I worked for the council in Edinburgh, I met more pompous, egotistical people there than I ever did in Hollywood.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
That is funny. What advice do you give to writers like James, or like the 20-year-old that's listening to this right now, and they're like, I want to be a writer? What do you tell them, or how do they start?
I always think that the first thing is it's like kind of enjoying spending time on your own. I'm a bit of a party animal. I like going out and meeting people and socialising. But I also need to get away from that completely and spend a bit of time, almost like a meditative thing, by myself. And I think that I meet, when I've taught creative writing in courses in universities and stuff, and you meet a lot of people who just want to be writers, but they can't spend any time on their own. They go crazy, So it's just knowing yourself to that extent. Can you spend time on your own? Do you enjoy spending time on your own? And not a lot of people will admit to it because it's quite sad. I don't want to admit to being a lonely bastard who just likes to spend, or an antisocial kind of weirdo who likes spending time on their own. So that's the first thing. But the other thing is, it's like it's just to remember that writing is rewriting. You're not trying to write the perfect sentence or the perfect paragraph or the perfect chapter. You're kind of constantly rewriting, and so the first thing you do is you get the whole story down, beginning, middle, and end. You just get it down. And even it's just some rough kind of road plan, and then you redraft it, and it's not for anybody else to see. The first few drafts are for your eyes only, until you get comfortable that you've kind of sort of sorted everything out, And it's amazing how many people get hung up on spelling and grammar and all that stuff. Leave that till last. You can sort that out, once you get the story down.
And people should remember that the Trainspotting started off as 300,000 words, right? It started off as this huge thing, and you just chopped it down. It's
good to know how to cut things down. I've never quite learned that to my own satisfaction.
Okay, I've heard writing is rewriting.
Who's your favourite author?
I kind of change. I'm kind of like... it's funny because I really like books rather than writers. I kind of like, some writers that, you really like them for a bit and then you get fed up and then you go back to them again and all that. And it's like... I watched the Tender as Night, the Great Gatsby film, because I'm a big Scott Fitzgerald fan. And I just wanted to see how they had redone this movie and how, and it was like I was sitting in that cinema for 20 minutes and I was really enjoying it. Then after that, I wanted to get to the book. I thought, I'm sitting in the cinema when I could be back home, sitting in bed reading that book, So I really wanted to get back to that, because I think that... That's one thing I think a good movie should do. I think it should remind you of a book.
Right.
But this, but also make you
But
want
in
to
a
watch
positive
it.
way.
Yeah. But I didn't want to stick around and watch the movie. I wanted to get back to the book.
Interesting. Did you like Gatsby?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I thought it was well done, and it's like, but there was a lot of depth and all that I kind of I felt was missing from the film that was in the book.
Do you think? Do you think that's why series have become so popular? Like, if you were thinking about TV series, is like, I don't know, early 2000, it was kind of like not quite moving material, chuck it on TV, and now it's just coming to, there's so many good series what you could reel off. Do you think that's because they get more time to cultivate the characters?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, it's because what's happened now with it's just with the big TVs that people have got in their house, the big high def plasma screens and all that. It's like the production values for TV, for quality TV, has to be so much higher.
Right.
So they're spending, like people like HBO, Showtime, and sort of Redbox and Netflix and all that. They're spending loads and loads of money on these shows. Like Game of Thrones, the production values are so high. So like,
It must be a couple million an episode.
Yeah. Oh, easily.
That's just actors,
easily,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Easily.
And because of that, though, you've got it's much because the production values are so high, it's much more attractive to quality actors. And basically, TV used to be where people washed up if they couldn't do movies anymore.
Yeah.
But now it's it's not like that at all. And it's just it's been a game changer. It's like The Sopranos basically changed the whole history of TV. So you've got, but TV also appeals to writers, and now you're getting the best writers going into TV because it's a writer's medium. As you say, you can play the long ball game with these characters. You can just develop them over a large piece of time. So it's like working in a novel, but on screen.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be very fascinating for you as an art form, as opposed to the movie. The movie seems such like an antiquated industry. Like you said, it's all about that weekend. And if something else, like what if there's a Boston shooting that weekend? I mean, like little things could screw up your movie premiere, and that's the one thing you've been working on for a year, and that's your shot.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially with a studio film, I think if you've got a strong independent movie, you tend to make the business by people going back to see it again.
Okay. Now, recently, Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle were talking about Porno, which I think was your sequel to Trainspotting, and about making that. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's been talked about for such a long time, but it's kind of now everybody's kind of back on the same page with it. It seems to me that. Everybody wants to do it now, and they're just ready to do it, and we've got we've got some kind of time frame. So it's it's just about getting the screenplay as strong as it can be, and going from there. Basically, you've got to kind of you've got to make sure that it's a screenplay that the actors can be really invested in, they can be really proud of, and that Danny really wants to shoot, so that's the biggest challenge now, is not so much the kind of the will of people to do it, because everybody's now seems to be on the same page, but to give them something to do that's really going to excite them. Yeah.
And you'll have nothing to do with that.
I don't know. I mean, it's like we're still kind of talking about it. I mean, John's had a script for a while that's very good, but it's kind of, I think it needs to be kind of updated a little bit. And I think the book was about was basically about internet pornography, and 10 years ago that was interesting, but now it's really passé. You've got the whole 50 Shades thing, and it's like it's no longer the kind of phenomenon. So I think we're probably going to have to find another way into the same kind of story about these characters' development and how they come back together.
Okay. Well, what's that one project that you want to do before you die? What's that big thing that?
There's millions of them.
Really?
There's millions of them. Like, I've got a folder that's just keeps getting bigger and bigger, I mean, I'd like to. The thing I think that you're always groping for the next thing as a writer. Is the thing that if you're not excited by the next thing you're doing, you shouldn't really be doing it. You've got to be kind of emotionally intense about the next thing that's happening for you.
And do writers have to live first? I mean, are you always out there? Do you push yourself sometimes? You're like, I'm a writer, I got to go do things and push my envelope?
Sometimes, I mean, not so much now, but I think I think when I was younger, yeah, and I get it through doing a lot of the teaching as well. I don't do that so much now, but I notice when you're teaching young kids, it's like they're technically they're very good. Their spelling, their grammar, their kind of use of words and imagery and all that is good. But in the States, it's so many stories are kind of. I remember when we were back at high school, it all starts off with that line kind of thing, and it's you kind of. It's like they just you can't really say when they're going to university, they've paid their fees and all that. You shouldn't do that. You should just take off around the world or get a job working in a bar or something like that. But the older ones that are in kind of late 20s, early 30s, I think that's when they start to get a bit interesting because they've lived a bit of life, but also just that bit old enough to kind of look back on it and start to process it too.
It's that reflectory period which you mentioned earlier, isn't it?
Was that buddy?
That reflectory period which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, you've got to get to that point, I think, before. I mean, there's some great. I mean, you get guys like Bret Easton Ellis who wrote Less Than Zero when he was 21. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah,
how
it's
you
ridiculous.
Can write like that at 21, but most of us can't. Most of us have got to have that period of, I mean, everybody wants to write that kind of novel when they're younger. They want to write a campus novel. They want to write a high school novel. But I think most writers would need that period of reflection from it.
Yeah, when you're in it, or if you are experiencing it, it's kind of hard to know.
It's very hard to stand back from it.
Wow. I'm going to ask you a very London Real question. If you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Irvine Welsh and give him a bit of advice, and you, as opposed to keep doing what you're doing, but what would you tell him?
I mean, it's related to that. I just say hang in there because it's like nothing good or bad lasts forever. So you just got to tough out the bad times until the good times come round again. And just enjoy the good times while you can, because sure enough, it's going to shoot in the post. For everybody. That's just the way life is. But I think at that age, you don't really have any perspective about that. You think if something bad's happened to you, is it my life's over?
Yeah, it's happening now.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing. Just perseverance, basically.
Okay. It's really good advice. Really good advice.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I appreciate the time today. It's just obviously do you get sick of being associated with Trainspotting, or is it always just an honor to ask questions about that, or do you always want to talk about the next work?
You kind of writing's such a weird thing because you can only talk about the things you've done. If you talk about the things that you're doing, you can't really. It doesn't really work. It might be a TV thing that never gets made. It might be a movie that never gets made. It might be a book that never gets published. It might be, or it might radically have to change before it's publishable. So there's all these things. So you have to talk about stuff that you've done, basically. And movies are such a powerful medium. If a movie becomes successful, like Trainspotting has, and like Filth is going to be. That it kind of makes it very difficult for because you want to people want to talk about that and it's like but you have to see it as a kind of calling card rather than an albatross around your neck. You have to remember that it might be your 1 millionth time, but it's the first time for them, so you have to go with it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today. I was like, I don't know, he probably doesn't want to talk about Trainspotting the whole time, but it was I was gonna rewatch it, but I can see it in my mind. I can see Renton, I can see all of these scenes happening, and so it's such a powerful medium, and it's something that I think moved a lot of people around the world.
The thing is too, you wrote so many good things. It's not like you wrote Trainspotting and that's you've kind of like you wrote so many good, decent stuff. One of my favourites, you mentioned it earlier, so is Malibu Storm. That book I thought was absolutely brilliant.
Oh well, thanks, buddy. Yeah, but I think the thing is though that film is such a strong medium, and you pull in a different audience. You've got a kind of book audience, which is a kind of a more core audience in a way, but the movies are just such a strong thing. It's such a if a film really works, that it just does open it up to a whole different kind of audience and a different sort of a different kind of level of audience. It's like everybody that's been into all the books, they always mention Filth and Malibu Stork Nightmares, the two, and maybe sometimes Glue are the ones that get all the kind of kudos, really. Yeah.
Okay. And for you, Skagboys is out. What's the best way for them to get that?
Oh, go to Tesco's or Waterstones or one of these places and just shoplift it from there.
Okay, fantastic. And Filth is coming out in October. It's got James McAvoy. He's brilliant, isn't he?
He's fantastic. It's a role of a lifetime for him.
Wow.
Now, he's a young guy. He might do more. I'm sure he will do great stuff. Again, he's done great stuff already, but he's absolutely amazing in this.
Fantastic. He's just great. I love watching him.
Are your books? Yeah, I'm just thinking what you were saying then about film being so powerful, and plus it's usually about an hour and a half. People like, in some ways it's quite sad, like busy, and in a way kind of losing just taking the time to read a book. I feel like it's going a little bit that way. And with audio books, are any of your books on audio?
Yeah, we've got a few. I mean, they put Skagboys and Trainspotting on audio, and it's.
But you're not doing the audio.
I'm not.
I
did the first one for Trainspotting with this mate Tam Byrne, who was he was the guy that did Filth on stage. He did a one-man show, and he's done the whole of Trainspotting unabridged, which is loads. It's about 10 CDs or something like that, and he's done the whole of Skagboys unabridged as well.
Oh, fantastic!
So it's so hopefully they'll do more from him, because he's really good. And I mean, it's great to have something like that on. If people are driving in the car, you can pick up a book, without having to.
I'm a big fan of audiobooks.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much now. Really, it must have changed so much when you think about it with the kind of audio books. But then with the whole self-publishing,
the self-publishing, the ebook and all that, yeah.
That's what a game changer. And what I myself writing. I've got my blogs, can get that out there, and then from that I've got kind of a collection of my experiences. And then I always thought that you have to go and get a publisher. I mean, I don't know anything, but I thought get a publisher, and self-publishing was for people who want to do something for like a hobby. But the more I look into it,
it's becoming big now, and it's all, what happens is, like, when people self-publish and it gets to a kind of certain level, publishers just come in and pick it up after that, and they give it the marketing, distribution stuff.
Right.
I mean, you can't say further than that for having a chance. You publish it, because I was looking at different packages, what they help you with, and they're really good. Yeah. And then you get it.
Well, in a way, it is. It's like it's like having your cake and eating it. You can self-publish it, and if it works, and if it finds a big audience, somebody's going to step in and push it further out there.
Right, so well, you can pick his brain more later about that. If they want to follow you on Twitter, you're at Welsh Irvine. Right?
Yeah, Welsh Irvine.
WELSH Irvine. We'll put that up on the screen. It's been a huge pleasure. We've been looking forward to this for months.
Thank you, boys.
Thank you, sir. It's actually because of the Colossus that you're here, because I think you guys were tweeting back and forth after we published his show a few months ago.
Internet stalking works.
Yeah.
Look.
And then I was like, whoa.
Fantastic,
yeah, so we've been looking forward to this. Everyone's been excited. And thanks for the insight. We really got some
Thank you, guys.
kind of behind the scenes.
No, really enjoyed it, mate. Thank you very much.
If you want to follow this big lump of meat, it's at J Colossus.
I like this.
You like
that?
that?
Big lump of meat. I might change up on it. Change a big lump of meat.
That's a biography title.
The lump of it.
Big lump. Your blog is colossalconcerns.com.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it. I tweeted out one of your blog posts last night about Randy Couture. Your videos are at Colossal Collective. That's the YouTube channel.
That's right, yeah.
I love it. You got to watch the Internet Troll video. It's good.
Yeah,
it's brilliant acting. And good film work too.
It was good comedy.
He's good. Just the cutaways and the little things they really make it pop, as they would say in Hollywood. So that's it. If you're listening to us on iTunes, please subscribe. If you want to see all of our faces, in good looking or not, you can come see us on YouTube.
Don't look at me when you said that, Brian.
I wasn't. YouTube channel London Real TV, and we're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. If you want to get in touch with me, send me an email, info@londonreal.tv. Tell me we're good. Tell me we suck. It's okay. It's all right. Either way. So that's it. Thanks so much, guys. All the best to you, Irvine. And that's it. Until then, it's about the journey, guys.
Laters.
Okay.
All
Peace. All right. Cool.
Welcome to London. Your space. You change the outerverse, you change the innerverse.
Yeah.
So he's talking about just airplanes. Airplanes have the capacity to help us transcend time, space, and distance. When you're on an airplane, you get to cross oceans of sky. And so one of his meditations is this wonderful thing that he says, he's talking about being in flight, right? He says, there is not much talk about the